G'day guys, Calvin and Jason from the Cartoon Company in New Zealand. We're not talking to you today.
Why did you mention my name then?
We're still part of the workshop.
Well,
Oh, I need a throttle body gasket. Thanks. Apparently my throttle body gaskets are no good, as I was cranking it over. I'm going to start the testing today. We're going to look. I've got a VF series transfer case sitting here, and I've done a wiring loom for a man in Australia. Goes up here, goes through the centre, and this video is intended for him, so he knows how to install it into his Landcruiser. He is using a surf type transfer case. There is a 4-wheel drive computer that just plugs in. It's powered by number 7 fuse. What I've got powered up, I've got main battery power in here. So that's from the battery, preferably from a fuse. I've got the ignition switch, which is in the A plug right there. Then I've plugged in this plug here, and I've written transfer on it because it's the same plug as the speed sensor on the transmission. So there's my ones, you can see it's damaged, but I've plugged that in. I've plugged in the factory 6-pin plug on the back of the transfer, and the 4-wheel drive engagement right there. There is also a speed sensor plug. If you're not using that, if you're using a cable, we will discuss that later on. So over in the B plug, there's a brown wire, and it does come with written up instructions of what each wire does, and I'm going to apply an earth to that. I've got the light in this brown orange wire in the A plug, so it goes from power, and this provides an earth for the light on the dash, so that would go to the 4-wheel drive light on your dash. And it is when it gets an earth signal from this fella. Oh wait. And the switch on the side of the transfer case is like an override. So when you move it on the shifter from high box to low box, it also engages that 4-wheel drive. So we can see there's 4-wheel drive moving. We'll hear it coming out. I can stop this one. So now we're back in 2-wheel drive. Testing for the 4-wheel drive complete. It passes. So this speed sensor on the back of the transfer case, I've got a feeling that this one's going to be getting a cable speedo drive. Now if it does get a cable, that'll mean that the ECU won't be receiving, or may not be receiving, the signal from the dash. Now depending on which dash it runs, some of even the cable ones have got a little 4P output from the back of the dash, and that can be used to feed over to the ECU. Again, looking at our information, SPD to ECU is a grey orange in the dash B plug. In the B plug, grey orange, there it is there. So if it's got a dash in it, so a sort of Toyota dash that has the 4P output, then that gets connected up there. Otherwise I've got the room to put in a Dakota Digital signal modifying box. It'll be on this plug, and I've got a pin out of that plug, and at the same time I've also put the tacho signal. So the tacho signal comes from the igniters over here. So the igniters have got 4 wires in one plug, 5 in the other. There's the grey wire, the extra wire there, comes through the loom, through the big engine loom to relay loom plugs, and it comes through to here. As you can see, I've got a bridge, and it pops out in the dash plug, and I think it's in the A. Then number 2, grey taco. So it's right there. But if it doesn't give out the right signal, depending on which dash, then that decoder digital box does both taco and speedo. So in here there is a power supply. The red wire is a power supply. There's an earth. And they need to be bridged to supply this one with power. The red wire and the black wire. The yellow wire is a signal. So if you're using that speed sensor, then these need to be bridged. Or if you're not using that speed sensor, you can use different wires. And again, it's a yellow wire. And you use that to feed information back to the ECU, which happens to be that grey orange wire right there. It's exactly the same wire that's over in the dash plugs, in that B plug. But this time it feeds back 4 pulses per revolution, fed off the rear speed sensor on the transmission, which happens to be that one there. And you take it, you modify the signal to make it get accepted by the ECU. There are some written notes over that, and that gets rid of the speed sensor code for the Soarer. I know in Australia it's very important not to have dash lights, depending on which state you're in. So some places it won't matter. I should actually mention there is a check light wire in here too. Let's see if we can find that. There's these two, which are the diagnostics. And there's the check light is a W, and it's also linked over in the B plug, pin 3W. There's a yellow wire right there. That will be the engine check light, which is an earth from the ECU. It actually just comes from, there it is here. There it is there, that's the engine check light. Comes out, through, over to these plugs here. Fan circuit. So this end one, I'm yet to engrave it. There's the fan on the end. This is the fan. I've got my test light, and we've got this plug here. It says fan. Momentary blank. There it is. There's a fan switch. And funny enough, it plugs into this wire here. Nice and long. Comes off the engine, nice and long. If you want, if it's too long, you can cut it shorter or just put a loop. And if I bridge those 2 wires, I should see my test light come on because the fan will be going. So I'm over here, here it is. You know what the circuit needs to make it work? It's really important.
Not the smoke out.
Fuses, actually. Fuses. It needs fuses. Yeah, they do stop the smoke coming out. I will write up a list of fuses. Fan is on pin 16. There's the fan fuse there. This time, let's get that test light working. It's happening, Jason. It's going to happen. Woo, there we go. So there's the fan switch. Wiring. Perfect. And that fan switch is a 16 by 1.5 thread. That fan switch, I generally use them up in the radiator, just beside where it enters the radiator. That's the main one that I use. If it's switching on too early, of course you can go to a hotter one. If it's switching on too late, you can go to a cooler one. And it does depend on you've got to make sure the quality of fans is really important. So, what have I got left? Oh, I've got a fuel pump. Fuel pump will go on. So the fuel pump wiring, similar to the fan, just pops out of here. It's over there. Because this is a Soarer and it normally runs a fuel pump ECU, we're using this tachometric relay right here for fuel. Just going to stop the engine from running. see the wiring looms come through the centre, and there's this 3-pin plug at the back, and it heads in to the knock sensors and the start trigger. So that's where that one is. You'll see that the oxygen sensor wiring comes down the sides, and these are labelled left and right. Right and left then. And the plugs to match are taped up onto the loom here, or zip tied up here. Without the engine cranking over, I should be able to click on the start input. So we've got ignition on the A plug, the red wire, and the white green. So the fuel pump fuse is number 14, and I click it over here. So it works on when the starter is triggered, and then it runs on a tacho signal, so it's a tachometric relay. There's the grey wires, which are the same wires over here in the adjusty plug, and of course a tacho wire does want to come out, and that'll be in that A plug tacho. In this department we have a oil pressure light right there. That comes through both the oil and the temperature, which is that one. They come through and they pop off the engine loom right here. Oil, H2O. You'll notice there's a black wire in each of them. If you need an earth in here, which most people don't, but you can cut the plug off and put a 2-pin and you've got the earth and the signal, and the same up there. You can see the injectors pop out, injector wiring pops out of the centre loom, runs along the back of the fuel rails, and I would like to see them secured, and the same on this side. This is the purge solenoid, so if you're running a breather to the fuel tank, it can go either front or rear. If you're not using it, just tuck it up and tie it in appropriately. This one's the cold start injector. So that'll go right in the middle of the loom. It's actually designed to have a couple of P-clamps right here and right there. And then zip ties on the fuel rail there. And just secure it so it won't wiggle around, won't touch on things, won't get burnt, won't let the smoke out. With a lot of videos like this, I'm communicating with my customers. And it's the easiest way to put a really good record of how their loom is put together and what I've done. I also, with this one, there will be some written notes as well, because it's quite an extensive wiring job and there's a lot to it. I'll show you what I started with. So this is what Justin sent me. This is just a standard Soarer wiring loom, and as per normal, it's pretty buggered. It really is a mess. What I'm going to do with this loom, I'm just throwing it away. But you see, there's broken plastics. One bit of plastic was missing the top. It's a really scruffy, ugly wiring loom. So the easiest way to sort it is to start with a new one, and the configuration of a Soarer isn't ideal, but this is what a lot of Soarers out of Australia are looking like, guys. This is what your wiring looms are looking like, and this is why there are so many of these cars that aren't running right, because their wiring looms are stuffed. You know, they're 30 years old, they're buggered. The replacement is in Raychem, so really hardy. It'll take a beating. It is resistant to chemicals, petrols, oils. In the hot places, it's got some heat-proof sleeving. So it's really going to handle the job we're trying to do with it. Justin, if you need a start loom, it's 2 meters long actually, with heat-proof, a little bag of extra lugs to crimp on, the cover on there, all good to go. So that's 2 meters. And any extra you cut off, that's why these lugs in there, just cut them off. Use the extra bit as an earth. Okay, you need that size for earths as well, and I'd like 2 of them. If you'd like an alternator loom, then there's one, I think it's normally about 500, I think mine's about 600. I've put a round plug, so confirm your alternator's round. This is marked sense, light, and ignition. And some information can come with that as well. So there's those 2 as options as well. Of course, with the main wiring loom, I have now tested that 4-wheel drive works. There's all the 4-wheel drive wiring that goes in that will go down and plug in. The only thing you have to watch is the transfer switch and the rear speed sensor are the same plug. Okay, so just watch that. The transfer is a white one and the rear speed sensor is a black one. You may have seen at the beginning of the video I was rattling an ECU. That is Justin's ECU. And it's actually quite a common fault with the Soarer ECUs that one of the caps, the capacitors actually fall off the board. It's mounted upside down, so in the factory position, instead of leaking stuff out, it just corrodes the legs off. But in this case, there was actually other corrosion in the board. There was some real nastiness, and it's leaked all over the place. And we looked at it, and it's just going to be a mission to repair. The repairman had just had another one just the same, and so we're seeing this a little bit. So we've found another core. I'm crossing my fingers that we're going to have the right ECU to do the job. For this testing, I'm going to use my Mines ECU. Yep, I'll use my Mines. The other ECU that's very close is a Crown, 141 Crown, or an SC400, very close. But both of those have 4-wire oxygen sensors, and I've only put a single wire oxygen sensor in this loom, so we get fault codes for that. The SC gives an EGR code if I plug it into this loom. It does run it, but that's not ideal. So we're going to try and source a proper Soarer ECU for this job. So I'm testing with my Mines ECU. We take the ECU and we plug in that end one, or the big one, the double, the 80. We do the bolt up. Now don't do it too tight. It's just holding an ECU connector on. Doesn't have to be super tight, guys. Just gentle. And we take the relays and fuses, okay, and we've got the 2 plugs. You can't get these ones wrong. So there's our extra plug, and then there's the main one. It just snips in, click, and there is the one that goes into the ECU. So on a Soarer, normally that's part of the main harness, but on this custom one I've taken it out. Plug that in. That of course is for the water temp and for oil pressure. The blue for water, brown for oil. Over here we've got the fuel pump wire. Fuses are important. I hadn't put the fuse in when I was testing the other day. There's the fan. That one's for the Dakota digital box, which has actually arrived. I've got some now. Permanent battery power on that one. There will be an extra one of these cable tied on there. I've managed to do so many lately, I've run out of them. These are diagnostic plugs, so the black ones are diagnostic, so you don't need to worry about them. They are for me, okay? I'll actually make you up a diagnostic socket as well, so you've got the same thing. And then we've got the A plug and the B plug. I've got a list of everything that's in here. The main ones at the moment are That red one for the ignition, and that one for starter. Have I got everything hooked up there? We hear the relays click on with ignition. Of course, we've got to make sure it's in park or neutral, which is there. So I don't have the gearbox, but I've got the shifter switch, so right there. I have confirmed that that shifter switch is going back to the ECU like it should. Igniters will be earthed on the body, and those are the igniters that were sent over, Justin sent over. And this is the airflow meter that Justin sent over. So we're testing his airflow meter because I've got it, and his igniters. Wiring goes down through the center. The cold start injector is connected. I didn't put the little connector at the back, it's actually in the middle, so you put that on as you're putting it together. The starter loom is in there, and I must remember to raid one of old Yella's knock sensors because Justin had a broken one. Down the front, we've got the air conditioning wire there, goes down, oil pressure at the front, we're all good. You'll also notice that the top sensor, or the top cam sensor, comes through the center of the wiring loom. So it comes through here, drops out, same as the coil, doesn't come across the front behind the pulleys anymore. You can't get them wrong. All the plugs on the loom, you pretty much can't get them wrong. Purge solenoid can be mounted back there like factory, or up here like an LS. It is snapped off, so I better go find one of those for you too. Just to confirm, well, you can talk to me whether you need one, whether you are going to be running a charcoal canister. And start is the white green one, it's right below the ignition. Don't get it wrong, next to it there's an earth. Dooka dooka dooka. You'll often hear me go dooka 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 when they turn on. That's the sound of the stepper motor resetting. And of course it's one of the tests that I'm checking for, that it does reset that stepper motor on key off, and it only does it after the engine's been running. I hadn't put a fuel pressure reg hose on. Well, I'm pretty happy with that. Seems to do what it should. Let's check it again. Woo-hoo-hoo. There are a heap of notes that go with this one. The overdrive switch got to be connected. It's on these plugs. We've got air conditioning. We've got oil pressure and water temp switches out. Or the water temp is a sensor. The oil pressure is a switch at present. But depending on the dash, it can be adjusted. There is a tacho wire out. There is a speed sensor wire out. But I think they're running cable. So if you're running cable, depending on the dash, we need a speed signal back to the ECU. Whether we run a Dakota Digital or something else, or it off the dash, so that needs to be addressed. There is the button for the shifter, four-wheel drive engagement. That's an earth. Air conditioning, that's an earth input. We've also got power economy. That's a positive input. There's a wire in there for that. Let me check. Tacho, AC, start, we're good. Overdrive, yeah, overdrive switch. Now, in the body plugs, I've also put a spare earth. So you can use that for like the overdrive. Also the kickdown. Put a kickdown in. From factory, the Soarers have a kickdown switch underneath the accelerator pedal. And lots of guys, when they do conversions, don't put it in and then complain it doesn't kick down. So that needs to be, I'd prefer that to be put in as well. We've got an engine check light and we've got reverse lights. So I'm pretty sure we've got everything in there we need to put in there. I'm also going to make a little bit of a tweak in here, and I'm going to add an extra plug onto the engine loom for the TPS enhancer. So that's an option down the track. If you want to get a bit better performance, then that's going to be in there already. You just have to plug it out, plugs on the box, and in it goes. So I'm going to do that as well. I think I've covered. So I've popped this plug in. You see it's looped. So that is for the TPS adjuster. If you ever want one, that little box works really, really well on the Soarers. Set of instructions. 5-volt earth, which are both in this plug. And then there's an input and an output to the ECU. So it's all done. This is the TPS side that's bridged at the moment, so it's just on the standard signal. So if you want it, that can be put in later on. I'm just going to talk about this plug here. I'm just going to reiterate what it's for. And the Dakota Digital box that I use, these are the new ones that do both tacho adjustment and speed adjustment. What we're using it for, if your dash doesn't have the ability, the factory Toyota dash. So if you're not using a factory Toyota dash of some kind, and you see here, this one has got a 4P. So the speed signal comes in. What do we got? We've got signal there. There's a ground and a positive, and there's the signal, and it outputs a 4 pulse to the ECU. If you don't get that 4 pulse on a Soarer ECU, then the ECU has a bit of a freak out, and we'll throw a check light, code 42, vehicle speed sensor. The transmission does still shift without that signal, but not as nicely as if it was present. And unfortunately, the rear speed sensor on the transmission, which is 4 pulses, which is what the second speed sensor, it's actually the first speed sensor. The second speed sensor is the one the ECU runs off, and the main, or SPD, it wants a different signal. It wants a digital signal, not an analog signal. So all that box does in that case is it converts that analog to a digital. ECU sees it, it's all happy, no fault codes. The advantage with this particular box is it can adjust tacho signals as well. So that's really, really cool. Fantastic little unit. Bluetooth, I use lots of them. Really neat. Well guys, we're going to have a little bit of a chat about air conditioning inputs. I'm using the Soarer ECU. I've got a wire here that's for air conditioning, AC. It goes from here, it toodles in to the ECU on the AC wire. Cool. And then from AC out of the ECU, we've got AC magnetic clutch, and that comes back to a relay. The relay has a power supply, and the output is going to be a positive for the AC pump on the engine. That's pretty straightforward, eh? So if we put an earth here, so this is an earth signal. This is my AC fuse. It could be on the engine, but it's the same wire. And then I put the ignition on. Just wait a minute. Let's put it on properly. There we go. And that turns the AC pump on. If I fire the engine and take the AC trigger on and off, you actually hear the engine picking up an RPM and dropping up and down. That's what it's designed to do. So we'll start it. AC on. Comes up a little bit. AC off. Drops down a little bit. Pretty simple, pretty basic. But so the power, the signal to the ECU is an earth. It's an earth out of the ECU to the relay. And then of course the AC pump needs a voltage, a 12 volt. Cool, that's done. You can also use the scan tool and read the information. Scan tool attached through the rectangular plug, flashing some trouble codes. And you can see it's not got any codes, it's just flashing, but I was checking for trouble codes. Checking for some live data. Confirming I've got data. I'm using the square one here, square connector, plugged into the system. It's flashing a check light, doing everything like it should. Right, it's time for me to take this loom off the engine and pop it in a box, ready to go back home to Australia. It's actually interesting. After this, I'll show you what we do when it's dark outside and there's Australian natives running around, i.e. possums. I've managed to get 2 of them, 2 consecutive nights, and I catch them by hand, because that's how Kiwis do it. To you Aussie guys, this is how we catch the possums over in Kiwi land. We catch them by hand. He's very much alive. See? Where you going, little fella? Very much alive. Caught him by hand. He was running along the fence there. He was just running along, so I went and I grabbed him. Came out again at night. Look, I got another one. There's a boy. Hey, little fella. Oh, don't you turn around on me. You got to watch them because they flick around and they'll try to climb up you. And then they make a mess and those claws are sharp. Whew. Hey, little buddy. He ran out into the bush and just stopped. I was able to chase him and grab him. He's starting to work out what's going on now. Right, time's up for you, buddy. Just going to run through a couple of common mistakes. One of them is the idle air control must be plumbed in after the airflow meter, which I've just taken the airflow meter off. My hand is now an airflow meter. So factory, you can see it comes across into here. I mod the throttle body, and that goes into there like that, okay? So that's really, really important. This fella here, it's a noise suppressor. Okay, so that not only does it help with radio noise, stopping chatter from the coils, but also for the cram and crank sensors. So leave them on, or fit an aftermarket one. These fellas, igniters, must be earthed. Okay, for testing I do earth to the engine, but I only run them for a short time so they don't overheat. In the factory situation or in service, mount them to the body. This is Justin's airflow meter. I'm just testing another one. We're going to do the last fire up and then I'm going to remove it from this engine. Jace, you got your muffs on? Diagnostics is all working. Double check that. Power, A plug, the red wire. We hear relays fire up. You're looking for crimpers? I'm trying to test here.
Oh, I'm just trying to do some work here.
You good now? Happy? Good. Here it goes. Come on! So I'm going to call that good. There's pretty much no other testing I can do until it's fitted to the engine. The engine's in Australia, so I'm probably not going to do that testing. So Justin will do all that checking. But real simple, the 2 wires in here get it going with a big main power supply. And then there's all the other bits and pieces making the dash and vehicle work. So I hope that's been helpful. Talk to you again soon. Catch you later.